And let's see, are we live? And yes, we are indeed live. Welcome to the Fiyahcon 2021 convention wrap-up roundtable. I am Reija from the channel The Book Finch, and I am joined today by Shannon from That's So Poe and Kristen from Kristenelle SFF Reader. And I will be moderating our discussion of today, our experience from Fiyahcon 2021 and what sort of panels we saw, how we enjoyed the programming, etc., what we are thinking about the whole convention and so forth. And first, I will just let Shannon and Kristen introduce themselves. So Shannon, will you go first?
Hello, I'm Shannon from the channel That's So Poe, and I really like SFF and was very happy to attend Fiyahcon. It's such a cool convention. I read lots of other things as well, but SFF is just so cool, and I love all of the stuff that is being done right now in the industry.
Hi, I'm Kristen from Kristenelle SFF Reader, which is hard to say. Yeah, I read a lot of science fiction and fantasy, and I am especially interested in watching kind of the awards for those books, such as the Hugo Awards and the Nebula Awards, and a lot of other smaller ones too, but those are the major ones. So I'm also just personally very interested in reading diversely within science fiction and fantasy genres. So Fiyahcon was a super cool thing to attend, and it was really great to just learn more about what marginalized voices are doing in speculative fiction.
Yeah, that is definitely true. And for me, this was my second time attending. I was attending last year as well, and I think Shannon was as well. But Kristen, this was your first time attending. So how did you feel about it? How did you feel about the experience?
Oh, it was great. It was super awesome. I think my biggest impression is just that this is such a wonderful, positive community, that there is just so much love and support in this community. It was really heartwarming to see everybody really doing everything they could to support each other and lift each other up and give each other advice. And so that warmed my heart, but it was also just a lot of fun to see some of my favorite authors actually talking on panels and stuff. And I feel like I learned a lot too. So it was super fun. And I even saw some friends on there from Goodreads and stuff. So it's definitely a great community feeling.
Yeah, for me, as someone who has gone to physical conventions, face-to-face conventions for years and years and years, I felt like as a virtual convention, this was the first time, considering that last year, because of the whole panorama thing, everyone had to adapt super quickly to how conventions were being run and stuff. And there was a lot of what, I don't know what's the word, a trouble. There was a lot of hiccups with technology and trying to learn new technology super fast. And I think that this convention was the first virtual convention where I got the sense of that face-to-face interaction and face-to-face convention community feeling, if that makes sense.
Yeah, did a really good job with that.
Yeah. And so, let's talk a little bit, just for a moment, about the venue and presentation and how the Fiyahcon staff did with the presentation. I'm gonna share my screen for a bit to show you. So this was basically the hub, the moment when you click the link and joined via AirMeet, which is a browser-based video conferencing app. This was what you saw. It was pretty art, all these vendor gallery schedule lounge, they were links, and also there were links up above. So in my opinion at least, the UI was very clean and accessible. So that was really nice. And let's see. No. Can I do the thing?
While you're doing that, I'll point out that artwork, I believe, is by Stan Daly, who is a Hugo nominee this year in the fan artist category.
Oh, really? I did not actually know that. That is really cool.
Yeah.
Just the colors are so nice.
I love the way it glows, like that teal just pops.
Yeah. Agreed. And I think that, they were talking about how they wanted to create this conference thing that felt not like the Zoom meetings that everybody's had to do. And I think that they did a really good job of that.
Yeah, and this actually was the setup, like when you weren't attending panels, you could join these kind of tables and have like sort of private conversations with people. And this was also the panel like spillover tables and stuff, so that when a panel was having a discussion and the timing was like the time was coming to an end, we could spill over to a table and continue the discussion. And
did you guys go to the spillover tables? I didn't go to any of them.
I went to a few, not all of them, because I had so many panels back to back to back to back. Exactly. So I was prioritizing, but I did try a few.
Yeah, I was curious.
Like, and there were also like booths for like vendors and stuff that had a similar setup.
So I attended some spillover table things like after the panels, and it was really fun. Not all of the panelists would always go, and I found that like usually they would just kind of like take a breather and just be chill at that point. I think I was expecting the first couple of times I went and that they were gonna like continue the conversation from the panel, but it was more like, okay, now we can just relax and chill and hang out together for a few minutes before the next panel.
Yeah, but like overall, like comparing it to last year when it was like there was a Discord, and you kind of had to follow a Discord as well as I think it was Eventbrite, and then there were a bunch of like Zoom links and stuff. So it was a lot less integrated into one place. So you had to keep tabs on multiple places, and even that they actually did very well. I think it was done as well as something of that scale could be done, and considering that they did it in a matter of like a few months was I think a tip of the hat sort of move, because it's not easy. And
I liked the integration. I liked how, I could go click on the schedule and that showed in my time zone, and I could go, join a panel. And I don't like seeing the chat most of the time because I can't process like both what the people are saying and the chat. But every once in a while, I have something to say, or I really want to hear what other people are saying about something. And so I like being able to navigate to the chat and then navigate away from the chat. Like I would just put it on the attendees list instead. And like just having that all in one place and not having to sign up separately for Discord, I liked a lot.
Yeah. Do we have anything else to say about venue and presentation? I think we were all pretty like stoked about the air meet. Like there were a few hiccups in the beginning where people were having trouble gaining access to the rooms and stuff, but I think that what I've always liked during last year's Fiyahcon and this year's Fiyahcon was the transparency of and the communication aspect. Like the con staff and volunteers were very upfront and open about communicating all of the issues and stuff with the attendees. So I never felt like I was groping in the dark. And I always felt that there was help to be had if I needed it. So I thought that this was probably the best virtual convention that I have attended so far. Not that I've attended many, but I've attended a few.
I also think that, like, having gone to some in-person cons and some virtual, I also went to WisCon last year. They did it virtual last year. They skipped this year. And then we did like the Con Zealand one. I really feel like Fiyahcon is, like you said, they're kind of best in show. Like, they're showing what you can make a virtual con be.
Yeah.
And that comparison also between some in-person cons, I feel like this was just so much easier to access. Like, I remember Con Zealand and how you had to line up like half an hour before a panel that you wanted to see, which meant you had to skip other panels. And like, I don't like being in crowds. And like, there were all of these kind of in-person issues too. And so for me, I'm like, oh, I really like this. I really like the virtual con. I really like how also, oh, that was the other thing. They had all of the panels immediately rewatchable during the weekend, even though they're going to take a little bit of time to get them posted for like archives, so that they can fix the auto captions to make them like accurate. But I liked that. Like, I was tired, so I didn't rewatch many things, but there were a couple of things that you guys had said, oh, don't miss this, and I was able to watch. So it's just, they did such a good job.
Yeah, definitely. I think that one of my favorite things, as someone who is in Northern Europe, I actually got to prioritize my good night's sleep as well as catch on the panels because of the replay function. So I think that was great. Yeah. And I also thought that a lot of the panels included things like auditory descriptions of the panelists and stuff. Like, people would tell what they were wearing and how they looked, so that people who had vision impairments and stuff could also get a picture of the thing. And I just thought that little things like that, they might seem something you take for granted if you are a fully able-bodied person, but as a critically ill and disabled person, I thought that those things were very neat.
Yeah, agreed.
And much appreciated. So I think we are ready to move on to programs and panels. So what kinds of panels did everybody go and see?
Kristen, you want to start?
Sure. I think the one that I was most excited about was, I should maybe look up the actual titles, but it was about what does justice actually look like? Can we envision justice? And it was, this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, because I'm just always thinking about it. I love reading dystopias and post-apocalyptic and that kind of stuff, but I think it's actually much harder to imagine, what does a just society look like? What is utopia? How do we get there? What are we aiming for? I hope we're aiming for something. And the conversation was just really nuanced and wonderful, and I really enjoyed that one a lot. And it was also one that I was not only looking forward to the most, but I also missed the first half of, because my wires got crossed. I missed the first half. So I was so thankful that I was able to go back and rewatch that.
I watched a lot of law-related panels that weekend. I watched law in SFF and why it matters, and with great power comes great insensitivity, power dynamics and world building. And what else did I watch? What does justice look like, just as Kristen said. And also there was a panel on bureaucracy. And I watched pretty much everything to do with paper pushing systems and bureaucracy and that kind of maneuvering. I was very interested in that. And also one of my favorite panels were neurodiversity on hard mode, BIPOC talk, ADHD and other acronyms, as well as A World Made for Us. disability and neurodiverse friendly architecture and industrial design. I thought those were excellent panels. And I will just also have you know that I have dedicated links to my notes that I took from Fiyahcon, from the panels. I have linked them down in the description, as well as Excel, like Google Sheet spreadsheet of all the books, the reading list that was curated from all the various panels from Fiyahcon by Tori Lynn Wrights. So those two links are in the description, so you can check them out as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I had a as dedicated a focus to a specific topic. I kind of just watched whatever caught my interest, but A World Made for Us, the architecture from a disability neurodiverse perspective, that was probably my favorite panel. I really, really liked that panel. And I liked that that was part of Bonfire as well. And like, I just loved the way that the con had structured, having the con itself and then having Bonfire, which is this companion convention that is run by a different set of organizers in non-kind of US spheres, and how those are set up for the non-US spheres time zones. Yep.
Is either of you having some trouble with your mic? I hear a little bit of clicking.
I do hear the clicking too. I don't know if it's me.
Can both of you mute yourselves for a moment? Okay, Shannon, come back.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay, I think it's Kristen who has the clicking.
Kristen, do you have headphones? I think you're still muted, but yeah.
Yes. I have to go get them though, so I'll be right back.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. It's always fun when there's feedback.
Yeah, the technological problems are always great when you are doing anything or trying to do anything of value.
Right.
I feel like for me, I didn't have any sort of like topics that I was like specifically interested in. I was just sort of going with the flow. But after the fact, I could sort of like realize that, oh, there is a certain focus that accidentally emerged.
Yeah.
Okay, Kristen is back.
Okay, did that fix the problem?
I'm not sure. I'm not hearing any feedback now that I'm talking, at least.
I'm hearing like just a tiny bit still, but it's not bad.
I don't think it's as bad as it was.
Yeah.
So we can continue. If it persists, we can always do like everyone just mutes themselves when they're not talking.
Yeah, true, right? So yeah, I attended lots of stuff, but the architecture one was one of my favorites. I just really, really liked the panelists, and I liked Bonfire. I didn't catch tons of Bonfire. I tended to just watch things that were playing during a time zone that I could catch, because there's so many good panels that I was like, I'm going to be just overwhelmed if I try to catch everything. But there were a lot of ones too talking about, I don't know what to call it, talking about writing for yourself, like not writing to the mainstream, white US audience that a lot of publishers are focusing on, but instead writing the stories that you care about, that tell stuff from your perspective or your community. So there was one about folklore's liberation. There was also, what was it? There was one that, Word, Sound, and Power, which was talking about like using dialects and things like that. And so there were just some ones that like talked about how do you write for the stories that are meant for you and your community when that's not what publishing necessarily cares about. Hey, Becca.
I also feel like even though a lot of the panels were targeting like the craft of writing and especially maybe people who do write, I think as a content creator as well, I got a lot of like after this weekend, I felt so inspired.
Yeah.
Like about different things and like maybe reevaluating my own priorities as a reader.
Very much so.
Like for example, like as like because like publishing is very focused, like especially in the bookish internet, we are very focused on the Anglo US, UK marketplaces, Australia as a little like minority thing, but like mostly UK and the US and Canada. And I've noticed as well that my reading has narrowed down into this very American-centric viewpoint. So I started to like think about looking inwards a bit and trying to like reconnect with my own country and culture in a sense through nonfiction and other works, like not completely abandoning obviously other works of fiction through the world, but kind of like trying to de-Americanize my reading a bit and trying to focus on other countries and some more translated fiction, which is like one of my passion projects is to always introduce more people to translated fiction and stuff like that. So I got really inspired, and especially like the panels focusing on this idea of finding your own voice and like not caring about the mainstream and focusing on finding your own audience. Those were really, I think, inspirational.
Yeah, I really agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was one.
That was really great. Yeah, go on.
Sorry, there was one panel that was like really specifically about writing folklore from your cultural heritage, and they just talked about so many things were so relevant. I actually ended up having my husband watch it, Adrian, because he is a teenager and he's actually writing right now. He's writing a D&D monster manual using all like Latin American like mythology and folklore and stuff. And so like he was like really identifying with a lot of the things that people were saying, and like some of the things that stood out to me were that like people don't even feel like they know or have an authority on their own folklore and their own history, and they have to go research, and then when they research, all of the research has been written by colonizers and it's racist and triggering, and it's like, oh my gosh.
I think we watched the same panel.
I think Folklore is Liberation.
Yeah, Folklore is Liberation and
it was a really good panel. Yeah,
that was a great panel. So
I agree.
Really great.
That's really cool that had like such a personal impact on you guys.
Yeah, I definitely like when I like, for example, the discussion about different mythical creatures that are maligned in other cultures and benevolent in other cultures. Like, for example, the dragon, how it's viewed in the West versus how it's viewed in like Asia and stuff. And I was also thinking about how, like in Finnish mythology, we have like the sort of kraken kind of creature, which is like basically we kind of invented Tulhu before Tulhu was invented, but like it's sort of like this big kraken. It's similar to the world snake. It basically comes around during the like end of the world. And then we also have our own interpretation of a phoenix that is both malevolent and benevolent at the same time, because it kind of like destroys the world only for it to be rebirthed in a sense. And also, interestingly, this idea that the world was hatched from an egg, like as a creation myth. So those kinds of things, like thinking about it, like what kind of things do we have similarities in between cultures. I thought that was really interesting. And yes, this definitely is one thing that it always strikes me as a theme when I attend events where the focus is very much on like intentionally bringing different sets of people together to have discussions and like learn from each other. I think that it very much inspires me to like be more mindful about how I am not the center of the world, you know?
I think also like the more you read of different like kind of experiences, and then you read more books by authors with those kinds of experiences, and you start to like understand some of the topics that come up a lot, or some of the themes or whatever. So like I've read quite a few Malaysian books in the past year or two, and now I'm starting to like have a slight understanding of some of like Malaysia's history and some of the like racial tensions and some of the you know, I don't know what to call them, like imported workers from poor Southeast Asian countries and like how that happens. And like it's really fascinating. So the more I read from Malaysian authors, the more I like start to understand some of that cultural context, which means that then every time I read another story, I get more out of the stuff that isn't necessarily spelled out for you. And so like that idea of like you're not the center and not everything is written for you, and you have to build that context so that you can understand what they're actually saying. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I feel like because I've read a lot of like SFF by like Black authors like N.K. Jemisin and Nalo Hopkinson, P. Lee Clark, etc. And for some of their work, I didn't have a lot of context because I hadn't read haven't read and haven't learned as widely of American history. And now, in the last like couple of years, I've been reading a lot of socio-political nonfiction about like American history and like racial segregation, etc. And now I sort of like retroactively have a better understanding of like some things in those works, in those fictional works I had read a few years back. I'm like, oh, and it sort of like clicks into place because now I have the context for it.
Yeah.
Because I read about it. So it's interesting that it can happen that way as well.
Yeah. And like the panel that we talked about, the A World Made for Us, the disability architecture one, like some of the panelists on there, like I recognize and I've heard them talk about. Andy C. Buchanan, I've heard talk a couple times, and I've read a couple of their like essays and short fiction. But like just every time I hear that topic come up, it's like it deepens my understanding of what is it that we're talking about here. And like each piece just sort of builds on itself. And like you said, like you kind of reflect back and you understand why was it that people were saying this book had like poor disability representation, or like why is it that this is like such an important work in the field, or those sorts of things. And it's just, I feel like the conventions really have such great discussions that then help you also think about and parse like what you're reading and everything like that. It like helps fill out some of that knowledge. So yeah, it was just super cool.
Yeah, that's a panel that I didn't get to watch, so I'm definitely going to make sure I catch it when we get the archives.
It was so good. But I also, you know, I think part of it too is that I'm so new to reading about disability. Like only the past couple of years have I been like reading nonfiction and reading more fiction as well by disabled authors, and like focusing on that kind of the representation that people want to see. And so like it's news to me. And so I'm like, oh, this is so fascinating. This is so neat.
I mean, I only like I've started reading about it in the last couple of years as well. But there's also like, because we live in a very like we center a very narrow kind of person. A narrow kind of existence that looks a certain way is about yay height and like can walk, talk, and see normally, etc., and inhabits the world in a certain way. So, for example, for me, even claiming the label disabled or chronically ill, even though I have those things, has been a huge thorny path, because I have so much internalized things surrounding it, like, well, if you can do this, then you are not enough of that,
Yeah.
So reading about it and reading about other people's experiences regarding that has really helped with that as well. So I think that when we talk about reading as a way to sort of solicit empathy towards other people, I think that it also can help you solicit empathy towards yourself. And that is something that we don't talk about often.
Yeah.
But it's very much that the whole point of I feel seen or I feel represented is this idea that you are kind of soliciting empathy towards yourself as well.
Yeah.
So we have some interest in translated works. I feel like there is a lot of books being translated into English, but they are very much from like a certain set of countries. Like you have a lot of translations that are coming out from Japan and South Korea, especially in the like literary fiction side of things. Spanish is another one. And Chinese has had a sort of resurgence now, and there's been a lot more like SFF being translated into English from Chinese. But I feel like, for example, Russia has a huge market of literature, modern literature, and a lot of it doesn't get translated. Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, all those countries surrounding and in the Russian federation and neighboring countries, they have a lot of literature that just doesn't get translated over here. And also, like, for example, in the Nordic countries, we have a trouble translating books amongst ourselves, even though we share a Venn diagram of markets. We still don't translate stuff. And then when you ask if things get translated into English, the answer is no. And the problem is also that you have to have good translators, people who understand the language. And when you have a niche language, say for some languages that only like 20 million people or 5 million people or 6 million people speak, suddenly you have less of a chance of finding translators from their like source language to the language that you want to publish the book in. So that is a struggle, and I'm always weeping inside a little bit when I think about it.
I think you're super right, especially about the genre, because if I think about it, like Scandinoir, so much is published from like mysteries from like Scandinavia, tons are published into English. And literary fiction, I see so much literary fiction from, especially like you said, Japan and South Korea that's translated into English. And so I have a feeling it's one of those things of, and I think we kind of heard this in a lot of the panels, where you have to have almost this movement, right? You have to have publishers and authors and readers who are all kind of working towards something. And then they build up that steam. And then the publishers are like, people have bought this before, so we're going to do more of this, which then means you've got a reinforcing system, which then means if you're trying to do something different, you're swimming upstream. And I think that SFF hasn't had as much translated. And like you said, you've got a couple people like Ken Liu who are working really hard to translate certain, like he's working on translating Chinese fiction and science fiction. And you've got some people who are like really advocating, but I don't think that SFF has as much of that momentum. Even though, like, Reija, you talked about Correo magazine before, like to us, not in this live. Like they're trying to do translated fiction, and Reed Becca in the comments talked about the SFF Rosetta Awards, which is translated SFF as well. So
the Korea magazine is kind of like they are trying to bridge gaps between like diaspora authors and source material authors.
Sorry, I was wrong.
Like so they have kind of like both. Basically, if you are a writer who has that heritage of like being an immigrant or a diaspora author or any like stuff. But there was that other magazine.
Isn't there a translated one?
Yeah, there is, because I remember that Silvia Moreno Garcia, Constellacion magazine is the one where Silvia Moreno Garcia, for example, has been editing and publishing, and they have like a goal where they are publishing each story in both Spanish and translated into English in the same magazine. So the stories are in Spanish and then followed by the translation, which I think is super cool.
And I think it's going both directions, because Malka Older said that she had a story in there, and I'm not sure if she writes in Spanish or not. She might.
That
but
was
generally
translated into English.
Okay.
No, so into Spanish. Sorry.
Okay.
Correction,
Yeah.
Into Spanish.
Yeah.
But
I like that they're doing
Malka
both directions. Yeah.
But I also think that Malka Older and Daniel Jose Older also like are fluent in Spanish. So, but don't quote me on whether the story was originally in Spanish or English, because I would have to double check.
Yeah.
I think part of the issue too is just that science fiction is such a niche genre. Like, if you go just based on Goodreads Choice Awards, like it's the genre that people vote the least in. So I wonder if there's just like getting published at all, and then having all these other barriers, like needing to be translated, and also, like they were saying at Fiyahcon, like a lot of times publishers will say, well, like, oh, well, we already have, one of those, like somebody writing folklore from this culture, like we don't need another one. It's like,
that's why I think that when Shannon mentioned the reinforcing system, that's actually a good way, a good segue to like one of the major themes and takeaways I had from Fiyahcon this year is this sort of like like this system that reinforces itself. Like you publish one thing, and if it sells, then publishing will be acquiring just that specific thing more and more. You have this with the Twilight clones and stuff like that. Like if it sells and it has a precedent of selling, then publishing will become interested. But it's like it's the whole glass ceiling type of thing. Like someone has to break it first for others to be able to have chances. And that's also another thing that I thought was a prevalent theme, was this idea of helping other people climb the ladder instead of pulling the ladder up after you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to go back a little bit to what you were saying about like needing to, like talking about folklore. Like something that stood out to me was that they were talking about there's this pressure sometimes to be like authentic and accurate and like get the folklore exactly right, and how it's actually folklore by its very nature is this fluid, evolving thing, and that you can find your voice and have your own take on it, and it doesn't take away from its authenticity. And so it's okay if there's more than one author writing about this folklore, because they're going to have a different take on it anyways.
I mean, I would also go so far as to say that what we are writing and consuming as fiction right now is us creating and consuming our own modern folklore. So, like, especially when you consider that it's something that has first evolved from like being oral tradition and paintings into becoming written, and now with audiobooks and recordings, we see another resurgence of oral storytelling, which I think is great. There was in Finland the epic Kalevala, which was a collection of poems, or rather songs, collected from various parts of like eastern and northeastern Finland, and all of those songs were originally like they were sung by people orally, and it was an oral tradition. And then when they were able to go back to all those villages and record some of the people singing them, because it's very much an art that has been lost. I kept thinking about all of that when I was listening to that panel, and also when that panel also touched on like censorship of what kind of folklore gets put forward as the correct canon versus what gets taken away, what gets pushed back like out the door, and like what is not accepted as the canon, and how that plays into the power dynamics at play. Like how, like for example, all the tales that sort of subdued women and viewed women as malevolent, they kept pushing those up and pushing down the ones where women had more benevolent roles. So I think that was interesting.
I read
the power dynamics.
Sorry, I read a modern kind of epic fantasy retelling of the Ramayana. I just read the first book though, because it was a very long series recently, and it was so interesting to me in the foreword because the author Ashok K. Banker, he talked about the history of the Ramayana, which is one of the great Indian epics that has been around for thousands of years, and how when he was looking into it and researching it, basically even though this is a thing that has been written down for a very long time, there have been so many different retellings, so many different versions, and you could look at the period of time in which it was written and understand what the cultural values were and how it was reframed and retold in each one. And so like the version that exists now that Indian kids grow up on is like based on certain versions, certain retellings, kind of grabbing certain ideals. And just, it's just really, really fascinating the way that folklore is both a way of kind of perpetuating that culture as well as reshaping it to form the ideals of the people at the time. And the other thing you guys were talking about, that idea of authenticity versus like appropriation, where you want to guard against people who are appropriating the culture, but at the same time, a lot of people feel like they're not authentic enough. And so it's kind of like that push and pull where, sure, you don't want people who have zero stake in this, like taking it for their own, but at the same time, that means that you've got the people who maybe, especially like for Indigenous people, a lot of times there was a cultural genocide where governments worked really hard to erase their culture. And so even though maybe that is their heritage, they don't know that much of it, they've been separated from it, etc. So can they authentically use it? And it's just such a fascinating discussion. And there were a lot of cool panelists discussing that.
There's also the idea that who are the gatekeepers? Like most of the time, the gatekeepers end up being the people who are not part of that community in the first place. And that's also feeds into these ideas of like supremacist viewpoints and like sort of guarding the status quo, whether you do it intentionally or not. It's sort of like a built into the system. Because you kind of like, when you see it happening around you, you start like emulating the behavior that is accepted by the larger majority.
Yeah. And HIM and Reed Becca both had some good comments about marketing and capitalism. So I think
this is definitely true that publishers wish to go with safe options. And I just think that it is very hilarious to me, considering that, for example, Ring Shout has already, I think, been optioned and gone forward with like a TV proposal and stuff. And it has been one of the standout things for me in these past couple of years.
And how P. Jelly Clark was like, I don't know if anybody is going to read this.
Yeah.
Because it is so different. It's so cool.
And here's another thing, like the aggressive marketing is one thing, but also that like an author that's already established and has name recognition usually gets even more marketing funding.
Yep.
And they wouldn't necessarily need it because they already have a built-in fan base and name recognition. Like if you have had like 2 bestsellers, like let's say, for example, off the top of my head, I'd say that Robin Hobb, for example, probably wouldn't need as big of a marketing push as someone who's just publishing their like debut or even sophomore novel. And also, I think this idea that if your first one doesn't sell, then it's like axe. Like
so rough.
Like I don't know a lot of examples, but the most prominent example I know of this is that Catherine Addison, who has written The Goblin Emperor and other books, first published on the Sarah Monet and published The Doctrine of Labyrinths Quartet, which was like a dark urban high fantasy sort of thing in a secondary world. And because that quartet didn't sell, she had to completely reinvent her literary existence under a new name and stuff. She doesn't really publish under Sarah Monet anymore. That's like a banned name because of her association with those books that didn't quite sell.
And I think the Ignite Award for community or something went to Publishing Paid Me, right? That hashtag?
Yeah.
That Tochio Onyebuchi and forget who the other person was. But that whole, do you remember the name? I forget who it is. I remember Tochio Onyebuchi.
My mind is blanking and it's, okay, yeah. I will
you look that
continue.
Up.
I will quickly look it up.
But I thought that was so cool that won an award for community something because that whole Twitter hashtag was all about like, let's be upfront, let's make this public. What did publishing pay you? And it became so clear that one, it was like the authors who were, you know, in line already with the system. So like, especially the white female, like fantasy authors. Yeah.
L.L. McKinney.
Yes. L.L. McKinney. Yeah. And that like a bunch of other people were like, this is what I got paid. And it's like, well, really
and then
clear.
Then there was that one guy who was like, I got paid this much, and it was memed all over the internet because it was a ridiculous amount of money.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, there was one guy who had gotten like a 6-figure deal or something for their first novel, and people were like,
yep.
What?
Yep. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that just the theme of capitalism came up again and again and again in like almost every panel, because it's all like a lot of the trends of what we're seeing has to do with what the publishers are buying and promoting, and therefore who can make it as a living as an author, right? And also what people are buying. And it's like this self-reinforcing system of basically rich get richer, people in power get more power. And it's so hard to move off of that. And I feel like Fiyahcon itself is one of those efforts to kind of move away from that and say, hey, let's not just do the things that are already proven to be in line with the systems of power, but let's do something else, and let's give authors and readers a lot of advice and insight into what they could be doing. So yeah, it caused a lot of like reflection as well on my part. Capitalism.
Yeah, and I feel like for me a big takeaway was, you know, you're naturally drawn towards the books that are marketed, and you have this internal bias to assume that the popular books are good books because people are reading them, so they must be good. But I need to like check that and be like, is it just being marketed a lot? Should I be checking out these books that don't have as many, you know, reviews on Goodreads, or I don't hear about from as many people? It's like I feel like we have an individual responsibility to kind of like push ourselves to read outside of what's popular in our bubbles. But also, I wanted to say, as regressive as the publishing industry is, and how they're always going to play it safe and publish the books that they feel are going to do well because they've already done well in some iterations before that. I was watching, there was a panel on screenwriting and like kind of shifting from writing books to writing screenplays and stuff. And Rebecca Roanhorse was on that. She wrote Black Sun. And she was talking about, yeah, however bad publishing is, Hollywood is 10 times worse than publishing. So it's like, yeah. But she's in, I think she's like working on a Marvel show right now about an Indigenous superhero or something. I've been seeing stuff on Twitter. It looks super cool. And I also thought that particular panel was fantastic because it was all about like, okay, I'm starting to get a little experience in the industry. Let me help you. How can we get you to have success too? Here, you know, and especially Rebecca Roanhorse and Tanana Review were so open and being like, yeah, please, I have been there, done that, and I want to help you. And it was wonderful.
I mean, there were so many moments during this whole convention where I sort of had this moment of like first of all, like becoming sort of emotional when people were sharing their experiences and the sort of unfairness of it all, but also the admiration of like sheer tenacity and strength of will, and also this idea of checking myself in ways where I have benefited from those systems, where I could have done more, even though I don't have like a big platform, but how can I use my limited resources to sort of hold down the ladder in a sense and sort of support. This idea of like in Jerry from Onyx Pages, who was a guest of honor in this con, always says that read with purpose, and I feel like I have always like I'm not necessarily like intentionally picking up things, but I'm always like trying to be mindful of what I do pick up and what I do promote and like what I read. And I feel like after this convention, I'm thinking about it even more critically.
I've been reflecting on that too.
Yeah.
It's like, and you know what? So this convention in particular made me reframe Injuri's read with purpose message, because I think that when I first started BookTube, that message, read with purpose, to me was a lot more about intentionally thinking about what you're picking up. And I think with this convention, I'm starting to also think about if you're somebody with a platform, thinking about what your reading is doing in terms of any influence you may have. Like, all of us are small. So it's not like we have huge platforms or anything like that. But at the same time, I know that there are other people who pick up books because I recommend them. And I know that I've picked up books because both of you have recommended them. And a lot of what happens on social media is like, if you hear enough people talking about it, you know, each time you'll think, that sounds interesting. And then maybe like the fifth time you hear somebody say, this is the best thing I've ever read, you're like, okay, I need to prioritize this. I need to get to it, right? And so it's like, the more you hear people talking about it, the more you think, maybe there's something to this. Maybe I need to get to it. Even though maybe the first time you heard about it, it also sounded really cool, right? And so I've been just considering, like, if read with purpose, my first couple of years on BookTube, influenced my purpose for my own personal growth, right? Then, like, what is my purpose in the community? And Injury is always so huge about community. And a lot of the panelists also were talking about community. Like, how do you pay it forward, like you were saying, Reija? Or like, how do you build up the community or have bigger change beyond yourself? And so I've been just really reflecting a lot on this and like, especially because I like to read a lot of backlist. I like to read across a lot of different genres. And even though probably, I'm going to just guess, a lot of the people who listen to my recommendations mainly pick up the SFF things that I recommend. Like, I'm just wondering, like, should I be changing what I'm talking about, what I'm prioritizing in terms of impact rather than just in terms of personal growth? So these are just some thoughts that the convention kind of has made me think about.
I think, like, it is good to reflect on those things, but also I think that in terms of how I view things, is also like how has this idea of creating content also sort of narrowed my reading, because like for example, like I am not a monolingual reader, so I could be picking up a broader selection of things, but then I start thinking, well, is anybody going to be interested if I talk about these things? Because if they can't get the books, but also if I talk about the books, maybe someone with a bigger platform will be interested, and maybe they will like maybe they have connections to a publisher or something. Maybe they should get translated or something. So it's like a butterfly effect, and I've been starting to like think more about like relaxing more into like picking up more books on other languages that I know how to speak, so broaden my selection, and then I can have a bigger breadth of like reading to recommend to people. And also I think like not assuming that my audience is monolingual either. Like this idea that I assume that, well, all my viewers are people who are just speaking English or something. That is false, and it's this idea that that the community we are in is a monolith needs to be a thing that we address internally and externally, because like
I mean,
yeah, go on.
sorry, I was just gonna say, I feel like reading across the globe is so English focused. Like, I feel like if an author, I think just because English is spoken so much and has so much cultural supremacy, like I feel like authors feel compelled to write in English if they want to be a serious author, and so then readers feel compelled to read in English if they want to be serious readers. And like a lot of my friends on Goodreads actually are not native English speakers, but they all read in English. And so I just feel like, Reija, I think you should talk about books in other languages, because a lot of readers do speak other languages, and it would probably benefit all of us to get English to be less censored in general.
Yeah, and this is the same thing that I have also thought about, like going back to the panel of like finding your own voice. I have also like the active choice of doing content in English has also like, and whenever I do a smattering of Finnish in a video, it always gets like uh, a response. Like people are always like I have this internalized fear that I will alienate people if I speak in my own language. But then when I actually do speak in my own language, I get a positive reaction to it. But it's like it's another one of those things where like you internalize things that society puts forward, and then you sort of become fearful of doing what's more comfortable for you.
And to be fair, like you might not get a good response. There's another booktuber, I think Alicia Guzman. She occasionally does videos in Spanish, and she has commented before and said whenever she does that, she typically loses some subscribers, which blows my mind. Like, who would do that? Like, if you don't want to listen to a Spanish video, just don't watch the Spanish video. Why would you unsubscribe because of that? But
Yeah,
just that there is that danger that you'll get a negative response.
I also watch I watch booktubers who do their content in like German and Spanish, but they subtitle their videos in English, and also booktubers who do their content in French, but subtitle their videos in English. And I've noticed that those creators always have a significantly lower subscriber rate and like view rate, and I just feel like it is in part on the like the Anglo-centricism of how we consume content. Like English tends to reign supreme, which is depressing in a sense, because there is a very diverse breadth of accents, cultures, languages all manner of things, and I think that we would greatly benefit every one of us if we would just embrace it. But you know, it's like the algorithm just isn't your friend in these things. It's like, oh, you made a video in Spanish. I guess I won't promote you in the English speaking YouTubes anymore, and it's just a mess. Do we have
I think
any?
it's also particularly. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I think it's also a particularly U.S. problem because we are monolingual. Like just as a culture, we don't prioritize learning other languages or valuing other languages. I think like in Europe and around the world, it's really common to not be monolingual, right? Like it's just normal that you learn lots of languages and people around speak lots of languages. But I think in the US, there's almost like this, a lot of people have this attitude that's kind of stuck up like, well, I only speak English and I don't need you if you aren't going to speak English. Like, and I think like I really want to see that attitude go away because I think that's a really harmful for everyone, including people in the US. It's harmful for everyone. Like languages are great.
Which I think this sort of talk about monolingualism and the diversity of world's cultures is a perfect segue to talk about some of the panelists and the diversity of panelists that we saw in Fiyahcon. I was like so happy to see panelists from all over the world in like it was great.
Especially Bonfire had like people from all over the world. I love that.
I thought that first of all, I watched this panel called Excavation, Colonialism and Horror, which had Uche Obuji, Felicia Martinez, Sin Irocklin, Niberita Sen, Trang Tan Tran, in like they were the panelists and they were talking about how sort of like having experienced colonial history like reframes the idea of what you view as horror and how you write horror and experience horror. And I thought that was an excellent panel, and it was about like horror as like they talked about horror as this destabilizing element and how colonialism is also a destabilizing element and how like horror doesn't always have to be supernatural. And also like this idea of like passive suffering is not at all true with like marginalized creators. Like there's this sort of resilience in the daily experience of horror. And I just thought that it was great. I had like a lot of cool quotes. For example, like Zin Irocklin said, "We go into horror with the hope of someone making it out." I thought that was great. And also another one was Trang Tan said that the core of your story is emotional and you don't need to explain anything to anyone. I like this, like that for me fed into this idea that a lot of the times we are expecting like marginalized creators to explain things, and if things are not like chewed out for us, then we start complaining about it, you know?
That was a theme across a few panels. I feel like there was a big discussion. I don't remember which one it was, but they were talking about like whether or not you should have to explain something about your culture in your book, like including like, do you italicize when you use a word in another language? Do you add a footnote to explain a cultural expression, or do you just leave it so you don't have to always explain yourself? And how a lot of times, particularly white audiences, expect everything to be explained to them. They expect to be the audience that is being written for. But how, you know, if you are not that majority, you don't have to feel that way, that you should have this freedom to let your culture be the center rather than the white reader.
Yes, and I also think that like it's in like I find that I think that Fiyahcon has opened up this like in a lot of conventions I go to, there's always like one thing that always annoys me is that when we are sort of forcing people to have these one-on-one conversations about things and we never seem to progress forward. And I thought that there was there was a lot of interesting like talking points about this whole idea that like don't focus on the people who are trying to keep you having those one-on-one discussions because they are there to distract you from the main point. Like focus on the people who are actually interested and like are willing to commit to listening. Because like if you are only trying to preach to the people who are just stuffing their hands in their ears and like stuffing their head in the sand and refusing to listen to you, that they are not worth your time. And I thought that this opening up of the conversation space to more nuanced and more complicated discussions, I think is more beneficial for future community building in general.
I don't know that I have anything to add. I just super agree. And it's like, I feel like there were a couple of panelists who were just super good about talking about how like you need to write for yourself. I think that the Word, Sound, and Power one that had P. Djeli Clark and Eden Royce and a couple of other great authors on it, just talking about like writing in dialect, talking about like it's fine if not all of your readers understand every word that is there, or if they're not, if they're not familiar with it, they can figure it out from context. You don't have to write for the most generic. And they had a good point that Eden Royce, I think, was writing a middle grade that had some Gullah Geechee in it. And her publisher had originally said, oh, we don't do anything in dialect because we want to write for a general audience so that everybody can understand it. And in the panel, they're like, yeah, but that's just code for white people. Like a general audience is not general audience. It is a specific audience that you're talking about. You're talking about white Americans. And so don't act like that is general. That isn't the world, And so just kind of deconstructing those comments.
Yeah, it definitely isn't the world.
Are you sure about that? I'm pretty sure it is.
I mean, I could go on a whole other tangent. Like, I have thoughts about United States as a center of like a beacon of culture. I have thoughts, but they are not for the scope of this this discussion. So I don't want to go on a 3-hour-long rant. But I think that this comment about like I didn't mind looking up the references in the story, I fell down a wiki rabbit hole, that is a healthy mindset to have. And I think more readers should be willing to do that. Like think about this idea, like when you're watching for example, a historical like period costume piece movie, how many times have you gone over to Wikipedia to look up the various British kings and queens? Because I know that I have done that, and there are several hours of Wikipediaing later I will continue watching the movie and stuff like that. Like I think that is a healthy mindset to have when you're reading as well. And also this idea that you're letting go on.
I was just gonna add on, like, I think when you center the American white reader, or when the American white reader thinks that they are the center, you just forget that that's what everybody else has been doing the whole time when they read our books. Like we think we're so special, like, oh, you have to explain it to me, but really, like, everyone else around the world that's been reading U.S. American books has been having to do this the whole time, and they're not complaining.
Yeah, I mean, as I stated in one of my videos this past week, like some of the English and American literature that's like contemporary, non-fantastic literature feels like fantasy to me because I live in a completely different set of culture and values and systems. So yeah, it's like where you live, how you're raised changes the entire context of how you view the story that you're reading. And I think,
Also,
yeah, go on.
I think that there have been, I feel like, I don't know if it happened in this Fiyahcon or in other panels, but people have also pointed out, like, dude, if you're so cool with, like, Elvish in, you know, Tolkien or, like, Klingon in Star Trek or anything like that, and you're complaining about, like, you know, other people inserting pieces of their experience or their culture or their language, it's not that you have a problem with something being different. It's you know, a little bit deeper than that, because people do this in fantasy, especially fantasy and sci-fi, all the time. So it's like, we're capable, guys. We can do it.
This is I can attest to this. I've been like being able to read subtitles is something of a rite of passage in my own country. Like the moment when your parents don't have to read subtitles to you anymore, that's the moment when you've grown up. So this, like, I think that Bong Joon-ho, when he accepted the Oscar for Parasite and said that once you get over the half-inch barrier of reading subtitles, you will find so many great movies to watch, and that is completely true. Like there is like every single country, like even countries you wouldn't think of, they all have their own like cinematic and literature related cultures. Like
Literary?
yes, I know a word, I know English.
And many other languages as well.
Some, yes. But yeah, like this idea that, like, I feel like sometimes there's this idea also that some cultures that like are less good and produce less good things, like media and stuff, and therefore are looked down upon. And I just find that sort of mentality to be incredibly harmful, not only to the people who live in those cultures and are producing that media. It is harmful for them, but it is also harmful to yourself, because when you lean into those kinds of mindsets, you are basically cannibalizing your own mind, in a sense.
And you read Disfigured recently too, right? And like the same thing with disability, where like a lot of the bad guys in media, in movies and stories and everything, have like some sort of disfigurement or whatever. And a lot of these things are used as shortcuts. And so what does that mean for anybody who has those things? Like, and they see that either they're totally absent from the stories, or the only place they see themselves is in like villains and things like that. Like, how does that affect the self, like you're saying?
Yeah, definitely.
Also,
like
able-bodied, I was just gonna say also white, able-bodied people. Like, let's stop being so boring. Like, don't you want to read different stories? Like, I want to read different stories. I'm bored of the same old. Branch out.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I'm always like, when I see a new thing, like, hey, here is like HIM was commenting about Zen Cho and stuff, and I'm like, here's a story that's like Malaysian inspired in Regency England. I'm like, yes, please, I will have that. Here's a story of like series of novellas by a Singaporean author about like silk punk, steampunky world with like gender non-conforming people as the focus. I'm like, yes, please, I'll take some of that. Like it's like basically like the genre is offering me a smorgasbord of cake buffet, and I get to eat as much as I want. Why wouldn't I? It's like 5 sets of different people are like, here you have some cheesecake and here you have some muffins, and I'm like, oh, what a nice breath of choice. And some people are complaining about it. I'm like, but why? Why? No, the toast is still in the corner. Nobody has taken it away.
Yeah.
So it's like we can have all of those things at the same time. It's like, it baffles me. Like for example, if you think about like people are crying about things like, well, like people are forgetting Asimov and Frank Herbert and all the classics, and I'm like, are we talking about losing all the old classics the same year that Foundation is having a TV series and Dune is having a theatrical release of a new movie? Like, are we really? And Wheel of Time is coming out. Like it's like I don't understand. So I think that, for me at least, this idea of having more is good. Like more voices and stuff. Like it's all like what's the word? When we read more variedly, we can also produce greater content and more nuanced media. And even the authors who wrote your favorite things, who might read these new things, and they might be like, oh, this actually makes me think about things in a different light, and maybe I will put that into my own craft and stuff. I think it's just like beneficial, you know? Like, let's not let things get stale. Like, if you think about it, if you let a puddle of water just pool around and get stale, it becomes poisonous.
Yeah. Yeah, that's 100%.
I have to say that I have done this same thing, and I am currently doing this with Japanese. I am desperately trying to better my Japanese so that I can actually read manga that hasn't been licensed in any of the languages that I do speak.
Wow, I'm like so impressed by that. Learning languages is hard. Maybe it's easier when you like have grown up learning other languages, but I'm trying to learn Spanish right now and I'm struggling. Like,
I mean,
like
it helps when you start out young.
Like, goals. Props to you guys.
It helps when you start out young. I mean, I was learning German and English in elementary school and Swedish in middle school. So, and those are the languages that have stuck with me the most, the languages that I started learning when I was a wee little toddler. So, you know, and I will say, it is never too late. It is never too late to do anything. Practice makes perfect. Also, community support helps in everything. And I say this even like in SFF. I feel like this, what I took away most from Fiyahcon was this community mindedness and openness and willingness to engage in conversations that are uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do we want to do our pay it forward section at this stage? We have been talking for 1 hour and about 19 minutes. So each of us has selected, or like basically after like listening to all the panels, like soaking in all of the information and stuff, I think it is very important to like use our platforms in a meaningful way. So I thought it would be a great idea to shout out some creators that we've been enjoying who are BIPOC. And I will share my screen, and I will actually let Shannon start with talking about the 2 people that you want to shout out.
Sounds good.
So first we have Book Nerd TV.
Yeah, so this is Wendy's channel. Wendy is like a close friend of mine. We met during Sci-Fi September maybe 2 years ago, the first year it was running. And she reads a lot of nonfiction, but also reads sci-fi and mystery and other things as well. And she is adorable. She's super fun. I love just, you know how that is when you just love hearing a person talk? So I just really adore it. I've done great buddy reads with her. We read How Long Till Black Future Month together, and we did like a collaboration video on that. I just really like hearing her opinions, and I like hearing what she's reading. She like recently read Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde, I think. And I'm like, oh, I really want to read that book. And just like, I just love her channel and I love her as a person. So I think sometimes, you know, we talked about this before, it's a little frustrating when you see really great channels that just don't get the same kind of promotion via the algorithm or whatever. They just don't get the same number of subscribers. But I love Wendy's channel.
Wendy also reads a lot of like nonfiction and biographies and stuff, and I've had so many nonfiction recommendations from her.
Yeah, she reads great stuff.
Yeah, so definitely go check her out. Like, she is fantastic. I would heartily recommend her as well if you haven't checked her out.
And then this is another absolute favorite of mine. This is Freddy at Sluggish Reader. He is a Malaysian booktuber. He reads mainly, I would say, literary fiction, especially backlist, especially things that are focusing on like women and women's issues. He reads a lot of especially Asian authors and like lots of translated works and stuff like that. Just really cool. And he's so chill. He's so calm and really sweet. We do buddy reads like every other month. So we have like another buddy read coming up next month. He's so much fun. And just, again, just somebody who I could listen to talking for basically forever.
And next, Kristen, do you want to share your picks? This is Bookish Brews.
Yeah, so this is somebody that I met on Goodreads. We are in some of the same Goodreads groups and stuff together. And her name is Amanda. She is Asian American, and she started this blog last year, and it's gorgeous. I mean, I love the way she does the layout. It's so artistic and beautiful. So definitely check it out. But her blog especially focuses on diversity and reading diversely. And her favorite genres are science fiction and fantasy. So definitely we read a lot of the same books a lot of the time. So I really like that. And she'll often have like a coffee beverage that she's like describing in every blog post, like, here's what I'm drinking today, and it's like some really fancy, delicious sounding beverage. So that's a lot of fun. And my other recommendation is Bookmark Chronicles, which is a booktuber that I recently found. I'm really bad with names. I don't know if she's actually said her name. I don't remember if she has. And I was like, before we got on today, I was like looking around trying to find, like, does she say her name anywhere? So I don't know, but I love her channel. She reads a lot of the same thing that I read. Like, she just did a review of Jade City, and I just finished reading Jade City. So lots of science fiction and fantasy. And I also really like that her videos are so accessible because they're all pretty much all under 15 minutes. So it's not a big commitment. Sometimes it's like, oh man, I don't know if I have like half an hour to watch a video right now, but yeah, and I love her opinions, and her personality is really fun. She's like always kind of a little bit deadpan and sarcastic, but like right on to, like, I love her opinions. I vibe with them a lot. So I definitely think that you should check both of these creators out.
All right, and the first person I would want to shout out is Native Lady Book Warrior. She is an indigenous creator from the United States, and I just find the way she talk, like she imbues a lot of her like life and culture into her like content, and she recommends a lot of indigenous books, but other books as well. And I just find her insights into the book she reads very informative, and she always like even when she's talking about books that I have also read, I feel like when I listen to her talk, she always manages to give me new insights into those books and makes me sort of think about the lens in which I view things. For example, she was talking about the a book by Louis Erdrich, and a character in A Future Home of the Living God. And a character in that book I had viewed very differently, but because she, as an indigenous person, has a very different context to that sort of character, she was viewing him in a very different lens. And I thought that was really interesting. And
she's also part of like a group of indigenous Instagrammers, I think. Like
yes.
Some of them have created booktube channels that then I think they've abandoned because they like Instagram better. And I'm a little sad that I'm not on Instagram because I like the booktube content that they made briefly while they're on. And so if you're interested in like indigenous like reviewers who are talking about all sorts of really cool books, I feel like Instagram might be the place to go.
Yeah, I feel like Instagram in many ways is probably more accessible. Oh no, we lost Kristen. Is like more accessible for content creators in general, because all you need is a phone camera to basically do your thing. And the next person I want to shout out is Shade Tree Reads. She recently came back from a hiatus, which I am very glad about because I was missing her on my feed. She basically is like, her content is very much like eclectic. She talks about comics, manga, SFF, but also nonfiction, literary fiction. Like, she has a very eclectic reading taste. Like, whenever, like, even if it isn't a vlog, whenever she does a video, I feel like I am hanging out with a friend. Like, it's very, very much a sort of relaxed, chill kind of content that she produces, which I find just relaxing and uplifting to watch. So I would definitely recommend you check her out. Like give her a watch, and if you like her content, please be sure to like subscribe and give her some love, because she is awesome. And I especially like her, like she has a very like blunt way of saying things. Like, I appreciate that sort of like deadpan honesty in people, like when people don't sugarcoat things or try to sort of give subterfuge to things. They just say what they mean. I love that. I find that very much appreciated, and she is one of those people who is very much like to the point and just herself 100%. So yeah, that's the page forward moment. I hope you found I hope you found some new people to follow, and all of their channels and blogs and stuff are linked in the description, as well as all the other materials like notes and reading lists that we have been talking about. All of them are listed in the description with links. So yeah.
I was just going to say, I also put a link to a Goodreads group in the chat a while ago. I'll put it again. But there's a speculative fiction and translation group on Goodreads. If you're interested in reading more translated fiction, you can join their monthly reads. But they also have shelves with like tons of translated works if you just want to go there for ideas too.
Kristen, you should put that in the chat for Reija, in our private chat.
Yeah, you can put that link in our private group chat, and I will put it in the description, so that, because sometimes if you link things, they might get disappeared into the void because YouTube views it as spam. If
Yeah,
it
I
doesn't
can't
come
see your
from the
link.
creator. Yeah, me neither.
Yeah. So if you give it
Okay.
to Reija, Reija can
Well,
post it.
here it is in the main chat.
Oh no.
Yeah,
We
that's
lose
short.
Kristen again.
But at the very least, put it in the description of the video. So, and yay, Becca, I hope that you
Does
check
that
out
work?
some of the channels. I don't see it. Oh, maybe you mean the Voxer chat. Yeah.
Also, I profusely apologize for my congested, fluish self. This is one of the things that I love about virtual space, is that there is no way that we can infect other people with colds and flus and stuff. A safe way of interacting. It is great.
Oh, and also just, I don't know that I could come to Finland to do a show with you.
That is the truest shame out of all of this, is that you can't just pop in. Like I always say that the one thing that I wish we could just have access to is like a teleporter.
Oh man,
like a door that you could just open, and then I would just be in the near vicinity of my friends. That would be so
have you
awesome.
read The Vanished Birds, Reija? I just read that. I know Kristen has read it too. It has like an instantaneous travel type of aspect to it, and like
isn't that by Simon Jimenez?
Yeah,
that's on my list. It's on my list. Currently, it has about 28 people in line for it at the library.
Oh no!
So I am in the hold line. It will come to me eventually.
But it's so good. But it talks about maybe some of the costs of instantaneous travel. So good though.
Yeah, I imagine that. I personally imagine that there would be like the toll of instantaneous travel on ecosystems and like electricity and the displacement of energy and stuff. Like I feel like that would be epic, like climate change speculative fiction. So like if you are an author, get on that. I give you my consent to use this idea very freely. I want to read it, and I am no writer. Do we want to talk about some of the books or stories that we heard about at Fiyahcon that weren't on our radar previously, but we now either really want to read or we have already scoured from the depths of the internet?
I just read this week. I'm going to do a review on it. I just read 2 novellas by Andy C. Buchanan. So since I was like, I loved the panel where Andy C. Buchanan was talking about like the architecture designed for disability and neurodiversity, right? I was like, oh, right, I should read some of the stuff by them. I've read a couple of short stories and essays, but I want to read more. And Rachel at Colonnati had just read Succulents and Spells. And I was like, okay, I want to read that. And so I read it, and I loved it so much. I think you would love it too, Reija. It's like, so apparently there's like this collective of New Zealand authors who are writing this thing called witchyfiction.com. And it's like a whole collective writing all of these novellas that are cozy witchy stories. So they're like almost inventing a genre. And so these are gentle, sweet stories about witches in modern day New Zealand. And they have like elements of romance, but they're not necessarily like romance genre. And so NDC Buchanan has 2 books out in their series so far, Succulents and Spells and Microscopes and Magic. And then they're going to have a 3rd one out called Alpaca and Alchemy. And they're just like so cozy and so sweet and like just so gentle. And like you're immersed in New Zealand. It's so cool.
I see familiars and foes and microscopes and magic, and those are instantly like, I have a mighty need.
It's so great. So like there's a whole collective. So there's a bunch of different authors, and each of them is kind of doing their own series. And right now, because I liked the NDC Buchanan one so much, I got they have a collection of Christmas short stories called like Jingle Spells, I think, and that's got like, you know, a bunch of different authors' pieces in it. So I'm like reading through that right now and trying to see, is there anybody else I want to check out on here? So yeah, if you want something cozy and set in New Zealand and with witches, I mean, it's just great.
I just
sounds like the perfect thing to read for Halloween if you're not into horror.
Yeah,
yes,
right?
Yes, very topical and current because we're heading into October. I just linked it into the chat, and I will also have the link in the description after the live show. Kristen, do you want to go next? What kind of books are you
I'm trying
excited
to think.
about?
I don't know that I learned about a lot of books that I hadn't like already heard of that are interesting to me. I definitely like feel like I learned about a lot of people that I didn't know about that are now very interesting to me, but they're not necessarily writing things that I'm necessarily interested in. Like one of the guests of honor, for instance, was I think Vita Ayala, and they are writing like comic books and stuff, which I'm not super into, but they're such a cool person. Like I loved their talks, and every panel they were on, they had such interesting things to say. And so I feel like there's a lot more people on my radar now that, yeah, but I'm not really thinking of any books, but there were like a lot of authors there that I'm like, I've read your book or I want to read your book, and it's so exciting to see you be on like these panels.
Yeah, I definitely have that as well. Like, for example, Bethany Seam Morrow and Brittany M. Morris are both authors that I've heard about and I've had them on my radar, but I haven't really been like hooked into like actually like going forward and picking up their books yet. Like they have been on my radar, but not like a priority. And now that I've heard them talk and like heard them in their panels and like express all these like ideas and stuff, now I'm like excited and I'm like inspired to like pick up their books. And like, let's just say that during Fiyahcon, a few library purchase requests might have been made. Because my wallet can't support every single purchase decision, so I have to advocate for my library to pick up the slack for me.
I tried, and then my library was like, we don't purchase things outside of the US, and so they rejected some of them.
How dare! I mean, also, because there are a lot of like, for example, there were a lot of like Filipino and Southeast Asian authors who had books that are published only like through Southeast Asian Amazon and Indian Amazon and stuff. I mean, I might have to log into Amazon, the India version, so that I can buy some ebooks. From various regions. So it's like, here's another thing of accessibility. Like you have to jump a lot. You have to be prepared to jump through a little bit more of like hoops in order to get to some of these authors that are not as well marketed and publicized as some of the other ones or people who are in the US.
Although some people, if they do well enough in their home markets, get to come to the US, because Sasha Stronach said that he was going to have, I think, like a US or UK publication of Dawn Hounds. And like, I didn't get to that.
Simon & Schuster or Scholastic?
Something like that. And I'm so excited.
He got picked up by a big publisher.
Yeah, so that is like one of those, I need to read this book. I've been meaning to read it since last year. it won the Sir Julius Fogel Award in New Zealand, and like I want to read this book. So a lot of reminders to read things too.
Oh, there was this other, like this was another bonfire panel that was what we talk about, where we talk about monsters. And here I got like I'm gonna link it to the chat as well. But this was another one that I was really interested in. It's basically How to Tame Your Tikbalang Without Even Trying by Miss Alma Eileen Joy Anonas-Carpio, who is a Philippine author, and it's like a reimagining of like Filipino folklore, of a Filipino folktale. And I definitely like that. Was one that piqued my interest the most. So I will also have this one. I linked it in the chat, and I will also have this one linked in the doobie-doo after the live stream.
So now that I've like had a minute to think about it, I'm remembering books that are on my radar. So I think one I'm most excited about, I asked my library to buy this one actually. Hopefully they'll do that for me. But In the Watchful City by S. Kuyi Liu, I think you say. That looks really interesting. I think it's a novella. I can't remember if it's a novella or a novel, but it's about like kind of what's the word? I'm totally blanking on the word. Surveillance. It's about surveillance state, and it's not necessarily portrayed in a bad way. So it sounded really intriguing to me. I saw a panel with Bethany C. Morrow, who is a new to me author, but she was so cool, and I really want to read books by her now. So I added MEM, M-E-M, to my want to read list on Goodreads. She seems like I want to read what she writes because she had really interesting thoughts. She's in the What Does Justice Look Like panel.
Did she also write the mermaid one?
Oh, and also,
I can't remember.
I can check.
I feel like
I think she wrote the was it The Silence of the Water or
Song Below the Deep? I don't know.
Yeah, that one.
Song Below Water.
There we go.
Yeah.
Together. We can put it together.
Isn't that like a start for a duology?
It might be a duology, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I just feel like
on Goodreads, so there's probably going to be at least a number 2.
I just personally feel that the like I know there are some graybeards out there nagging and complaining, but I personally feel like the state of SFF is in very good hands, and I just I just keep imagining like if all these things were available to me when I was a teenager, I would have been so stoked.
It's just I'm so stoked now. I'm just like so excited. There's so many good books.
I am so excited, but imagine what it would have been like if this was the breadth of things when we were like teenagers. I mean, it would have been something else.
I'm also excited about the new novella that Malka Older and Brent Lambert talked about that they're doing together. The I wrote it down, The Mimicking of Known Successes, I think. Mimicking of Known Successes. Yeah, that it's going to be like this cozy mystery sci-fi novella. And I'm like, okay, this is what I need. So like there were so many things that made me so excited about the future of SFF and about the work that's being done. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, I also hope sincerely that like, okay, the world is opening up. We are going to see the return of face-to-face conventions. But as a like person who is a global attendee, like there is no excuse anymore to have conventions be just in person only. Like you could have like virtual tiers. You could have programming that's virtual, like that's online and stuff. And there should be more pressure towards other conventions. I'm looking at you, Worldcon, and DisCon. Well, DisCon is going to have a virtual tier, but we don't. Like, I hope now that Mary Robinette Kowal is chairing the event that it's not going to be a shit show. But
yeah, we signed up for the virtual one, so we'll see.
I'm tentatively, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. But just going forward towards other conventions, I wish wholeheartedly that instead of being a bunch of snooty brats and holding up their nose towards all the things that Fiyahcon has been attempting and succeeding at, they will actually look at that and be like, I think we could also incorporate some of those ideas and have this be like a thing that we shall put some focus on. Because like that way you could actually have like the whole breadth of the community partake in things.
And especially like with Bonfire, where you can have some like US or whatever, wherever the location of the con is, having panels that happen virtually on the other time zones. And like that is, especially if it's like Bonfire where it's free for people to attend, since a lot of people who are not in like the global north don't like the cost of those tickets is just absurd for a lot of people in a lot of countries.
Yeah, well, if you consider the fact that you have to pay for the convention ticket, then you have to pay for the flights, then you have to pay for the hotels, accommodations, food, etc. It becomes like only a certain type of person can afford to do that. But if you have like virtual tiers, and for example, then you can have like a tier of like cheaper tickets. For example, like daily tickets and stuff like that. Like this is a matter of like accessibility. So I just hope that people will be inspired to try to, like, for example, next year is going to be like there's this convention in Finland called the Fiyahcon, which is one like the biggest SFF convention in the Nordic countries, and they had some like attempts at doing virtual programming while the convention couldn't be organized live, but they didn't really commit to it fully. But I really hope that next year when they are doing a face-to-face convention, that they would do like a virtual tier. So that it doesn't have to apply only the US conventions either.
Yeah.
So we have been at it for almost 2 hours. Do we want to have like a final moment of peace? Plug ourselves. What is coming up in the channel? What are we currently reading, or something like that? What do you want to be your final words for our lovely audience before we part ways?
Okay, so since we're talking about translated fiction, Becca in the channel and I are buddy reading this book, The Best of World SF, edited by Lavi Tidar. And so much of this is translated. It's got like so many really, really cool authors. Lots of people I know, lots of people I don't know, like Vandana Singh, Tayo Fuji, Tade Thompson. So like lots of cool Aliette Bedard, and this is just like so good.
That sounds like right up my alley.
It's so good.
I need to get that.
And this is a new release. It only came out like, I don't know, a month or two ago. And it is excellent. It has people from all over the world, just really good short sci-fi stories. So if you're looking for more translated kind of SFF, this is a good one to pick up. So that's kind of one of the many things I'm reading. And other than that, I'm just really into the witchy fiction thing right now.
And Kristen?
That sounds awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to next-a-thon. I am going to be reading. Well, I'm really, really excited to read The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina by Reija Cordova, because she is an Ecuadorian author, and my husband's Ecuadorian. So it's just like I've never read an Ecuadorian author before. So this is really exciting and special for me. I'm expecting to really enjoy that. And I am also at the moment trying to decide if I'm gonna read Jade War by Fonda Lee or finish The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, because I'm really excited to read Jade War, but I also really need to finish reading Poppy War because that's in the best series category for the Hugo Awards this year. But those are next on my list.
I am actually really excited about your thoughts on the Zoraida Cordova book, because I have heard great things about her books, but that particular book that you are planning on reading has been the one that has really piqued my interest. Like that in terms of like topic, that just seems like I would very much like it, because I love twisted family secrets and drama. Just give me all of that. Oh, did you lose you?
Really excited.
Could you repeat, Kristen?
Your mic cut out for a second.
Oh, I was just saying, I think this book is her first adult novel, so I don't personally vibe with a lot of YA, so I tend to avoid it. So I'm really excited that she wrote an adult novel, so I'm really particularly excited about this one for that reason.
Now I'm even more excited.
It's gonna be great.
So I am currently reading R.B. Lemberg's The Four Profound Weaves. Been really enjoying that one. I've sort of been taking it slowly, reading only like one part at a time, because I just want to simmer in it. It is so short, and I don't want it to go away too fast. And another thing that I am starting, hopefully, in the next couple of days, so that I can finish it before September ends, is The Quantum Thief by Hannu Rajaniemi, which is a Finnish hard science fiction, like space opera thing, which was pretty popular back when it was published, and I've never gotten to it, so now is the time. So yeah. And
I haven't read that one, but I've heard about it.
Yeah, I will let you know what I think about it. If it's too hard for me. I have heard it compared to Yoon-Ha Lee's the Machineries of Empire series in terms of like the complexity, and I'm a little bit intimidated by that. So I'm like, I hope that I will like it. So yeah, this has been our chat, our roundtable discussion on Fiyahcon 2021, what we liked, and all the panels and stuff. And hopefully, this event will inspire some constructive change within the community and within the like SFF event organization sphere and stuff. But yeah, I personally really enjoyed the event, and it was very fun for me to discuss it with you and share my thoughts with all of you.
Thanks, guys, and thanks to everybody in the comments too.
Yeah, thank you for being in the comments and being wonderful viewers, because I mean, it's always better not to talk about things in an echo chamber. So we will see you on the other side, and have a nice one. Bye-bye.
Bye.